In flavor? Does it?
You know, there's a bit of a sacredness to this pattern. In fact, if we can turn data into a pattern or a rule, then according to Daniel Bohr, near magical results will ensue. We no longer need to remember a mountain of information. We need to only recall one simple law. So tell me, what is pattern recognition saying here?
Welcome to Are You Smarter Than a YN?
I fuck with the YNs, I ain't gonna lie.
A group of YNs from Old Block or the cartel?
Quick batch of young niggas.
This is what a YN is.
The brain is a tricky thing. It maps collections of pictures we absorb every day and forms it into a subjective reality. In sociology, we call these images presented by society the spectacle, or at least if you're looking at DeBoer, who's like this white guy. And these spectacles come in many forms. Donald Trump, Yope Me Mama commercial, Lil Tay, but watermelon and black people in subjective terms have only been a common means of association for about 200 years at this point. You know, following that the end of slavery thing, it's called emancipation. Many Southern African Americans grew and sold watermelon. It became a symbol of their freedom, but many Southern whites took offense to this. They reacted self-sufficiently by turning the fruit into a metaphor of poverty. The important part about the spectacle is the framing. Why is the spectacle happening? Why is society presenting this to me? Watermelon came to symbolize a feast for the unclean, lazy, and childlike. To shame black watermelon merchants, popular ads and ephemera, including postcards, pictured African Americans stealing, fighting over, or sitting in streets eating watermelon. The narrative of whiteness was being combated by a growing class of black entrepreneurship. Therefore, a spectacle had to be created to degrade those communities. Watermelons being eaten hand to mouth without utensils made it impossible to consume without making a mess. Therefore, it was also branded a public nuisance. But you know, this watermelon being a symbol of poverty was far from the truth.
Palestine will never die!
However, since the value of a slave is the value of the expected output or services the slave can generate, minus the costs of maintaining that person, be it food, clothing, shelter, etc., pointing black people as lazy was a needed spectacle for white comfort of America. See, there's a sacredness to this illusion. This same concept of images, forming atmospheres of perception, has definitely carried on to the modern day. I mean, look at the NYCU statue.
Who do you think she is?
She's everyone. She's anybody.
There's nothing attractive about the statue. There's nothing.
Who's meant to contrast the statues of white men in Times Square. The sculptor says she's a fictional character.
Weave wearing, hairline pushed back, a stereotype black people do not like to associate themselves with.
It's a DEI statue.
In the same breath, Beyonce, Rihanna, and the other models who pop up on the many screens of New York aren't thrown into public discourses quite like the sight of this hypothetical black woman. Throughout these years, signifiers of blackness have formed objective perceptions called stereotypes to an outside degradation of black identity. However, for the longest time, this degrading spectacle was a means of connection. The origin of the watermelon can be traced back to approximately 6,000 years ago, when it was domesticated throughout Sudan, Egypt, Ethiopia, Libya, and Kenya. Ancient Greeks praised the watermelon for its restorative and healing properties. By the 7th century, watermelon had made its way all the way to India, and by the 10th century, it was found in China. According to Howard University Afro-American Studies lecturer Dr. Joe Von McAllister, newly emancipated Africans employed their farming and entrepreneur abilities to produce and sell items like watermelon and the like. Personal gardens and their ability to sell its goods after completing their obligations fostered a taste of freedom driven by their own efforts and their own terms. However, this new economic model upset some former slave owners in the South who were angered that formerly subjected African Americans had carved out a lucrative business niche for themselves and were enjoying the fruits of their labor. The air of freedom among those formerly enslaved further humiliated Southern whites, Dr. McAllister said. The sheer audacity for freed Africans to persevere in spite of their deplorable action caused a concerted effort and sharp response of Southern whites to create a racist trope around the fruit and freed Africans.
The difficulty for me is that there's not the same technical support, monetary support. There was like 14% black farmers many years ago. Now there's like 1 or 2%.
According to the U.S. Department of Agriculture, black farmers own just 0.5% of America's farmland, while 95% of American farmers are white.
See, but framing matters here. The thing that kept watermelon an active spectacle of society was the media, with its newspapers and radios that worked off a centralization of white normalcy. See, more than ever, we're governed by these same images. However, However, those advertisements, TV ads, and company logos back then, used in degradation, were a purposeful mold of separation correlated to a material context of Black community. So what happens if these caricatures materialized and we had to look at them as artists and not just art pieces? What happens when you get an algorithm that rewards these characters as curators of culture, as faces of art movements in an algorithmic retention model? I mean, we've all participated in spectacle. You'd have to be lying if you say you haven't heard of Soulja Boy. After all, we all did that dance once upon a time. These are just one of many trends and digital instances of virality that surround Black culture. Soulja Boy, just like this list of Streamers University students, are identical in the sense that they form our relation to culture. They form and create a means of relatability to an audience. And now more than ever, TikTok and streaming is the place to be. We've since grown out of the paper 7 a.m. news broadcast day and age. Now we have short form content. The framing has shifted. What once was newspapers and then broadcasters filling the public's eyes with spectacles of understanding in and out of community are now creators fueling the public's trends, discourse, and popular culture related to community, all seen in a 7-second vacuum of content dopamine. So question, is it easier to recall the whole history of watermelon on the first sight, or just to laugh at the spectacle of degradation that someone throws on a screen? Although TikTok popularized the original 7-second model entirely based off of Vine's success basically, YouTube Shorts and Instagram Reels in their popularity have created an algorithm of content by the same design. It's hard to even classify how much short form content you see daily, from clips on Twitter, clips on YouTube, clips on Instagram. Damn, I, like many others, feed into the retention machine, sadly. Furthermore, do you notice how much conversation you get from Black people on TikTok besides like real life? The aspect of interpersonalization has made this form of content creation a new third space of a sorts too, and some influencers are doing amazing things with it. This one person I follow is Matu, literally grew rice fields in Senegal. Some of y'all deserve claps. And since the internet is the biggest third space we've ever created, the normalcy of Black TikTok slang, now more than ever, sets popular culture's conversational normalcy in popular trends, from Kai Cenat's Riz, to DDG's My Ball, to J Cinco's Shark, to Duke Dennis's Type Shit. Added to that, because of the inviting nature of the internet, these same models of internet slang mold a reality of integration in everyday life for people who've heard that word probably a day ago. This is fed by comments, often parroting the same lingo from this month's trends. Approval in terms of followers and likes. So with such a predictable algorithm and caricatures of statures open for the public to become, it makes sense that appeasing an algorithm equals making the audience respond in a predictable manner. And one of those ways is to use applicable caricatures that can predict illicit reactions from a overarching macro audience, aka the watermelon kingback Black method sometimes. Now, I'm not really saying we're doing this to ourselves, but some creators take advantage of digital minstrelsy. It's important to note that these same projections of media are contorted images of self that these people are choosing to embody. This is more than just a reality I'd pin to a couple bad actors in the algorithm though. It goes deep, real deep. See, Black projection has always been in a crisis. Throughout the 1960s, Black consumers experienced growing identity consciousness, entwined with the civil rights movement, which raised their expectations of advertisers and led to calls for recognition as consumers and culturally distinct content. The aspect of finding identity in marketing during this time shifted to finding positive representations of identity in everyday objects applicable to Black third spaces. Since Black people weren't as landlocked as they used to be, traveling skyrocketed in community, and with that came the popular green books, which kept Black Americans safe from sundown towns. However, even they would feature light-skinned, straight-haired women, sometimes beside white ones. Was this really an ideal like Black advertisement? Apparently back then they thought it was. Positive representation was beginning to have a dual connotation, which policed the image of Black women. Black-owned businesses such as the Colored Mail would print postcards with mixed families, notably the head being a Black man. Even among civil rights groups, figures we've come to know as ontologically Black Jesus, like Rosa Parks, were only selected because of the color of their skin. Claudette Covens, one of the 4 plaintiffs in Browder v. Gale, which ruled that Montgomery's segregated bus system was unconstitutional before Rosa Parks refused to give up her seat.
My name is Claudette Colvin, and in 1955, I refused to give up my seat to a white passenger on the bus in Montgomery, Alabama. Harriet Tubman was holding me down. Hands were holding me down on one shoulder, and Sojourner Truth hands were holding me down on another shoulder. And I was glued to the seat, and I could hear the white passioners saying, she gotta move, she gotta move. That's the law, she gotta move.
Quote, the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People briefly considered using Colvin's case to challenge the segregation laws, but they decided against it. She was young, dark-skinned, and pregnant. The same monikers of blackness we also embody interpersonally, which makes clip farming one of the wildest aspects of black art to ever exist. It's important to remember that the black influencers you see online, because of the spectacle and commodification, appeal to a comedic and widespread vector of power that's been apparent for decades. Today I want to talk about like the means of association, I guess, of like blackness and soft power. Our brain memorizes patterns, right? And these patterns signify like rules, right? You know, you can use like a crosswalk because there's like a little guy that comes up, right? You know your mother is your mother because there's this relational acquaintance that you've just made normal this whole time. You know, you've been child your whole life, like when it comes to people. But the soft power of like a stereotype goes deep. When we turn pattern into like a rule in a social sense, this method of pattern recognition can be like dangerous, you know? My first example is like watermelon and chicken and how it's correlated to black identity. And I've had a complicated relationship with watermelon my whole life. Have y'all liked watermelon? Have y'all liked watermelon?
I have a dream.
Well, what's your relationship with watermelon been like? Your life. To be honest, the only sort of pushback I got whenever I was eating watermelon or doing anything watermelon or chicken related was like when I was in a classroom, because like my Sudanese church like loved making chicken and like cutting up watermelon and everything, you know what I mean? Just in community. And we was just eating it, whatever. But whenever I brought that to school, all of a sudden there was like this added spectacle. You know what I'm saying? And this is what I'm alluding to when I'm saying the public zeitgeist of soft power that blackness exists in. You know what I mean? You felt it all your life. But the way it's materializing digitally and the way it's, I guess, going around with artists, influencing artists, or becoming a tool for artists, like watermelon is a tool for artists, like a tool for speed, is so much more different. You know what I mean? It's different. Afrocentric Distortion said, finally made it 20-year streams again. I hope you're doing well. I'm happy you're here. I'm doing okay. Allergic. How are you allergic to watermelon? You allergic to watermelon?
I have a dream.
No. You allergic to watermelon? Like, isn't that like 99% water? You allergic to the 1% like green in there? Like the crust? Like, I'm actually curious though. I've never seen anybody allergic to watermelon. But yeah, but this method of relation doesn't really make sense. Well, it didn't really make sense to me. You know what I mean? It only made sense in the third spaces I was accompanying in terms of perception. You know what I mean? And then funnily enough, the most amount of correlation this comes with was because of my skin tone, right? It was intrinsically degraded only with black people, right? And this is a purposeful connotation with like black identity. Like essentially, so white people wouldn't feel bad about slavery historically, but on top of that, they got to laugh at the difference between like them and a black person. You know what I mean? Like minstrelsy was a very needed reality for even an ethos of white supremacy to exist, right? So when we say minstrelsy, it's not just the performance, it's also the caricatures it birthed in the media, in the newspapers, in the XXX and X, these images being everywhere, and like the theater of minstrelsy being popular in the North, especially where there was like less black people, to stop that projection that the more white communities had on black people. You know what I mean? Because when you're isolated from certain communities, especially the North, who had like less slaves, that perception or that mythos of a black identity becomes all the more powerful. You know what I mean? Because there's no black people around you to counteract that ideal. So the relationship to the image here becomes like a solidified reality. You know, I need to stop saying, you know what I mean. The relationship to the spectacle becomes a solidified reality, right? And that solidified reality speaks before you can even say a word. Essentially. And that was that third space I was feeling in tandem with watermelon and chicken. And that's that kind of feeling you get of racialization, especially living in a black sense. So this is important to know when we're leading up to the conversation of Speed, because Speed and King Bach wield these same tools of, I guess, appropriated humor in the modern day. Although I'd say this is way different than like a back then sense kind of thing, because Speed and King Bach are they're products of art movements in our age, in a digital retention era, right? So they've had to work with a very different medium than other people have, and throughout the years, even the practice of blackface has become more and more scorned, and instead put on the caricatures of black people to embody, right, in an advertising sense. Like Aunt Jemima, we talked about it last video. Aunt Jemima was actually multiple black women that they hired to be Aunt Jemima, right? In the same way, a Speed is essentially given this platform in order to be Speed and in order to do these practices of minstrelsy, the same way a King Bach is. So I'm not correlating it all the way exactly, but let me read this real quick, because I'm like, I don't want to misquote things. Sometimes I love recalling things, like recalling from memory is fun. Recalling from memory is fun and very, very fun, but sometimes we need to read. So this is where I got it from Popular and Pervasive Stereotypes of African Americans. It reads that stereotypes of African Americans grew as a natural consequence of both scientific racism and legal challenges to both their personhood and citizenship. In the 1857 Supreme Court case, Dred Scott versus John F.A. Sanford, Chief Justice Roger B. Taney dismissed the humanness of those of African descent. This legal precedent permitted the image of African Americans to be reduced to caricatures in popular culture, right? And this shown up the Mammy, the Mandingo, the Sapphire, the Uncle Tom, and Watermelon. But as we're going down to Watermelon, and you look at these other ones and you're like, oh, well, why isn't Speed like the Sapphire, the X, or the X? I'm saying a lot of these stereotypes persist in a digital algorithm, which allow them to have, which give them space to breathe. Like the Sapphire stereotype here. The Sapphire caricature from the 1800s through the mid-1900s popularly portrayed black women as sassy, emasculating, and domineering. Unlike the Mammy figure, this trope depicted African women as aggressive, loud, and angry, in direct violation of social norms. The Sapphire stereotype earned its killed. And that same Sapphire stereotype, or that same even method of correlating black bodies with black women, have carried on to, I guess, the statue in New York discourse. You know what I mean? And that's how blackness is perceived in the public zeitgeist, where people are like, oh, black body should look like this, or black body should look like this, right? But I'm saying that's a whole different conversation with women, because with women specifically, there is an algorithm and there is a male gaze inherently that is even fit, like a patriarchal lens that's even like harder to fit into, but I'll get into that. First, I started yapping, but we gotta pull up some of these TikToks. It's nice to see everybody in here, by the way. Someone said, finally catching a live. Village Idiot said, hi, what's up? Afrocentric Distortion said, honestly, people forget that minstrelsy was also done by black people. It's not heinous to say black people can participate in our own stereotypes. Yes, and I would even say that even in the modern day, like a lot of black artists even wield the soft power of blackness to an extent in a number of different ways. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I think it's okay sometimes for people to be clowns. You know what I mean? I don't think Speed is always always a minstrel. You know what I mean? Sometimes he could be super funny. He's literally so popular. He went to China and just changed the soft power of China and skyrocketed Temu stock just by going there. You know what I mean? Like, he went down to South America and was the governor of a country for a bit. Like, the soft power of Speed being wielded in a public zeitgeist, in order to do what he does, started off with minstrel content, but he's done a lot of other things too. I'm more so alluding to how a lot of these stereotypes, or how a lot of these perceptions of character exist in a vacuum in a digital space. But when we're touching on artists, like you said, people forget minstrelsy was also done by black people. Yes, when we're touching on artists, those segues to success, right? When you see a KSI, when you see a King Bach appealing to racist caricatures, it's because that's what gets these laughs in a lot of these algorithms, right? The videos you'll see Speed get millions of likes for and interactions with in certain spaces are not eating watermelon. In black spaces, it's not eating watermelon, right? But you go on somewhere like Twitter and going viral for eating watermelon or something like that, right? And I wouldn't say that Speed and Speed directly contributes to this, if I'm being honest. Like, a lot of these things, he's just clip farming. You know what I mean? And he's very transparent about that. He's like, I'm just clip farming. And, but when we're talking about the tools of a black artist, that's very much in the category. And I want to talk about how these artists utilize it. Someone said, I've been here for 5 minutes listening, but I don't really know where you're going with this. Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. With this ramble, we're getting into Speed and essentially how he's a new minstrel figure in the era of digital retention, right? When I was little, I thought watermelon and chicken jokes were funny because everyone liked them. Imagine my shock when it turned out to be actually racism. Yeah. But let me, because we got way more people in here now, but we're gonna be going into Speed and the aspect of his persona or his caricature in an algorithm, how he kind of wields the aspect of I guess you could say a perception of blackness to a soft power of blackness in an algorithm in order to, grow, or in order to clip farm. And I want to talk about how this kind of soft power of stereotypes exist in a public zeitgeist, right? Because of a continued history of racism. Because if we're getting into minstrelsy and we're even getting into why stereotypes like watermelon exist, right? It's because it was needed as a purposeful degradation for black people, right? In order to feel better about having more material wealth and being seated at a higher position, certain things like these caricatures were made up, saying black people were lazy, black people were X, black people were X, you know what I mean? And watermelon too became an association with black people's laziness and everything in advertising. But let's look at this. Let's look at this first. Because this girl really snaps.
If you are a person of color, yeah, and your whole community doesn't back you, that is the biggest like, if you are a white person and you support somebody that their whole community has abandoned, that is the biggest telltale sign that that person is fucked. KSI brought himself up from doing those very, very, very damaging stereotypical black impressions. He was the one that was doing Watermelonisha. He was the one doing the click click clacking for African accents. That's what he basically put his whole culture on the line to appease white audiences, and that's what came up. So then white people looked at his content and was like, oh, I can laugh at this because a black person is doing it and has co-signed it. Yeah. That's what you brought yourself up on. So I'm not surprised that this is where he is. And I'm not surprised he does this. And to be honest, for that to even come to your head to say that means you say that. Because if you are...
So I want to talk about this. I want to talk about this kind of mythos of identity. It's official said every country has stereotypes stamped.
And your whole community...
Wait, let me stop this. It's official said every country has stereotypes stamped onto their people, though. Okay, so what's different about this one, right? What's different about this one? This one was needed because of an ideation of black identity. Like, literally, this construct is the purest form of white culture. It's official. This construct of black identity was made in comparison to white people. It was basically white performers saying, oh, I'm putting on blackface, and then taking on this caricature of what black people are. And then essentially that black caricature became so popular, right? That black caricature of minstrelsy became so popular that it became the regulatory stereotype spread across black people. So before you're even speaking, you're influenced by a watermelon stereotype, right? Well, white people were uplifted from this. So you're right. Every country may have stereotypes stamped on their people, but if we're talking about the validity of the stereotype and the way it uplifts black people and degrades black people, then it's night and day. It's night and day. I don't see how you don't see it. I have a dream. I had a dream. But yeah, as we're going through specifically I guess, the construct of a minstrel. I also want to say there's nothing wrong with even embodying a stereotype, because some people say that there's bad stereotypes. Specifically, I want to talk about the New York woman, right? A lot of people say, let me pull this up, because I need a reference. I need a reference to show y'all.
People are mad at that statue in New York.
The New York statue. I am super sorry. Give me 2 seconds. How did I not set this up? I gotta search up what was it called? I knew it was of a black woman. And we're not using... Yes, this statue. Have y'all seen this statue? Someone said it's another thing to note that there's no positive outcome of a stereotype, despite positive stereotype being a term. Yeah, there's no positive outcome of a stereotype, because stereotypes still exist to accentuate whiteness, right? A black stereotype accentuates a white normalcy. An Asian stereotype accentuates a white normalcy. A stereotype accentuates a white normalcy in a way, right? It's I'm not gonna lie, but when we were talking about statues like this, right? This stereo depiction of a statue, because it was noted that this statue wasn't supposed to be anyone. It was just supposed to, encompass a demographic. This looks like, I'm not gonna lie, this look like my mom.
I have a dream.
Like, we up. Like, this looked like my mom, right? But a lot of people had heavy offense with this statue, specifically because this encompassed a harmful stereotype, right? People were saying that this was ingrained. People were saying this was pushing bad thoughts on the bodies of a black woman, but we're about to get into that. I need to hear this. We need to hear this argument.
Looking like people are mad at that statue in New York of the black woman because she's dressed in a t-shirt and probably some leggings or jeans, looking like who did it and why. Very unglamorous, very blah, very nobody wants to find that attractive. If that's the stereotype that's being given, that's the stereotype that's being reflected, it's going to also start showing up in different places. And I think it's a genius idea to show people who they are so that they can understand how people view them, so they can make the changes that are necessary in order to, dismantle the bad stereotype of certain women. Okay. Now, I say this with love in my heart. If you want to look better, do better.
Okay. In my opinion, I don't think that stereotypically black bodies or stereotypically black anything is inherently a bad thing. It's the hidden context that lays behind it, because this, like I said, this woman looks very much like my mom. You know what I mean? The real issue with stereotypes is how they exist to degrade the image of blackness, assigning positive stereotypes like Beyonce, let's say, as the good black body and the central artist. It gives a jaded image for all the black girls that according to this TikToker need to work harder in order to fit the mold of someone like Beyonce, because make that make sense. If you have dark skin, you're not gonna get any lighter. If your hair is 4C, it'll always be 4C. If you're naturally big at a normal body weight while doing your daily activities, then that's just the place you at. You know what I mean? And I'm saying these same stereotypes exist in a construct we continue to live through, and algorithms have allowed for certain stereotypical afflictions on an overarching view of black people, which have allowed for artists like King Bach and Speed to create a new type of minstrel caricature that caters to this generation's perceptions of whiteness. I'm not saying watermelon content is all Speed does, but we gotta get a look at this. I gotta emphasize this, because y'all gotta see some of these. I was still muted. Oh my God. But yeah. My mute button is so sensitive, on the top here. I swear to God. I swear to God. I'm still muted. Y'all are lying at this point. At this point, we're throwing hands with each other. At this point, it's me and you and we're throwing hands at this point. Someone said I'm uncomfy. Well, it's nice to see you in and out, jail. But yeah, as I was saying, in a soft power of history, the context of speed, or the context of speed coming in and out of this perception of blackness. Did you see AJ? That person's probably white. They saw JL, they saw it and they just left. They said I'm uncomfy. Yeah, they probably white. They probably white. I have a thing. They said I'm uncomfy. Cracker. Oh no. But when we're talking about a soft power whiteness and a soft power relation, right? This needed spectacle, or this added spectacle on black people, specifically in a Jim Crow era South, has carried on to a digital zeitgeist, right? And in short form retention, it's carried on through aspects of like clip farming, or aspect of caricature that Speed embodies or King Buck embodies, right? So I'm saying when it comes to the watermelon jokes or theatrics, that is very much more so not such a thing in perception or connotation in black circles or black people. This exists in a public digital zeitgeist, right? And these rules and afflictions have kind of just taken shape and allowed for like Speed and King Bach to come up. But as someone said, LMFAO, black Haitian girls, I'll cuff you with that right best bag you there. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, everyone say sorry. I'm so sorry. I have a JL, you deserve like 80 hearts. I wish I could send like hearts through the screen. How does the MacBook Audio do it? Oh my god. I was doing this yesterday with like the focus hearts. But like, yeah. So as we're talking about, I guess, an ideation of black identity and why this matters, minstrel caricatures have carried on throughout animation, throughout theater, and throughout music, right? And these stereotypes and caricatures rule over like black life even before they have a chance to say a word, right? Like, remember that Ebola song or Celebrate Our Differences song? Setting a verifiable means of white identity in the modern day is intrinsically linked with fathoming certain parameters also in a digital discourse or even in digital trends, which give white people the most amount of comfort, right? And I thought that you were white, but you're not. You're not. Meaning the same soft power of spectacle Speed is like pulling from a public. Like Speed lives in, you know what I mean? Like Jim Crow isn't Jim Crow anymore. Jim Crow has essentially evolved in a digital sense and taken the form of Speed, because Speed is so big, it doesn't matter who you are, you probably have him in your algorithm. You know, being the biggest star and most immediate correlation to black identity in the modern day gives white people a verifiable interaction with blackness and verifying the means of racism, you know. When you're with him because he's clip farming, watermelon being correlated to black people is the culture of those third spaces, right? And when that digital third culture is so big, it's like shutting down like places in China and things like that. It becomes a tangible way or a material way of seeing black identity, right? So he aids himself to the spectacle of the internet, right? And a lot of people have tried the Speed method, but no one has been able to garnish as much traction as him. So I'm not completely demeaning him, because I'm like, it does take a lot to even be that young and like that, you know what I mean? But in the age of the internet, this is different. I want to answer some questions. Someone said the China trip certainly sent his SEO to the moon. Someone said, what's up, Tur? What's up, M? But there's a couple more TikToks I want to go over, and like two more ideas. Honestly though, I don't feel the ethicality of even streaming some of these things. Now I'm like, because I do have these things in here, but I'm like, even I'm feeling uncomfortable with this. I'm like, Okay. Anyways, that was a short little stream. That was a fun little short little stream. I'm so sorry. I need to get a little bit of a rant off because I saw something on my algorithm and I needed to spit real quick. But it was nice seeing y'all. It was nice seeing y'all.
I have a dream.
No, it was super short. But I'll be here another day. Like, I'll definitely be here tomorrow for a longer amount of time. I just need to get like a little bit of a rant off of speed. But it was nice seeing y'all. Thank y'all for coming. Please come. Someone said, Turb, did you ever see the dude on Twitch use a white avatar as a black man, but did the same content in his views? A lot of the rise on him to do consistent content, streaming all the time, and someone will be watching. Yeah. Thanks for subbing and everything, and thanks for being in the audience. Thanks for always coming back too, because I also want to say it's also been a delight for the side channel and y'all like even supporting there, and even like coming from there and everything, from the Twitch, from everywhere. Like, thank God. Like, yeah, and I'll catch y'all later for real.